The charity gala was a spectacle of lights and forced smiles, like an impressionist painting that, upon closer inspection, revealed a confusion of strokes and colors that didn't quite fit. I was there, surrounded by familiar and unfamiliar faces, all wearing the same superficiality that I tried to ignore. Soft music played in the background, while the clinking of crystal glasses and artificial laughter echoed throughout the luxurious hall. However, the beauty of the setting couldn't reach me. I felt like an island in a sea of people. I looked around, watching the interactions of others. Groups of people were animatedly talking, exchanging compliments and full smiles, but I felt as if I were viewing everything through a fogged glass. A sense of loneliness enveloped me, like a mist that wouldn't dissipate. The weight of my existence felt heavier in that opulent space, where the pain I carried became even more evident. It was as if everyone there was living a life I could no longer access. The tragedy that had marked me had isolated me, and the thought of reconnecting with the world seemed increasingly distant. The memory of my family assaulted me with overwhelming force. The genuine laughter echoing around me became a cruel reminder of the joy I had lost. The accident had robbed me not only of people but also of the ability to allow myself to feel fully. I had become a successful businessman, but what did that mean if I couldn't share my life with those I loved? I looked at the champagne glass in my hand, the effervescent bubbles rising slowly. It was like my life, superficial and fleeting. As I contemplated my reflection in the crystal, a figure caught my attention. A young woman, with wavy brown hair and a blue dress that highlighted her beauty, was approaching a staircase. She appeared a bit clumsy, as if she were more concerned with balancing than enjoying the party. An involuntary smile crept onto my face, a glimmer of hope amid the darkness I inhabited. But at the same time, a feeling of concern overtook me. It was a party, and the last thing I wanted was to witness an accident. My heart raced when, in an unexpected movement, the young woman slipped. Time seemed to slow as I watched her fall toward the ground. A primal instinct took over, and I didn't hesitate. I rushed forward, reaching out to catch her. The touch of her skin against mine was a shock, a reminder that life still pulsed. I managed to prevent her from falling completely, but I couldn't stop her from lightly bumping against the stair railing. The sound of the impact, though not loud, reverberated in my mind like a distant echo. She turned to me, a look of surprise and gratitude in her eyes. Her face was slightly pale, but there was a spark of life that illuminated her features. In that brief moment, an unusual connection formed between us. I was not just an isolated millionaire, I was a man who had done something meaningful, something that reminded me that I still had the capacity to help. The feeling of purpose, although fleeting, wrapped around me like a warm cloak. However, as the adrenaline began to fade, I was overwhelmed by a wave of memories. The accident that had taken my family from me became a palpable shadow, and the young woman before me seemed to somehow connect with that pain. Her grateful gaze held a depth I couldn't explain. There was something familiar in her eyes, something that pulled me toward a past I was desperately trying to forget. As the people around us continued their dance of smiles and superficialities, I couldn't look away from her. But amid this inexplicable connection, fear began to creep into my mind. What was hidden behind that young woman? Why did I feel there was more to her story than she was willing to share? Curiosity and insecurity danced within me, and I knew I needed to pull away. It was safer for me, safer for her. The party carried on, and as the hours passed, I slowly distanced myself, finding an isolated corner of the hall. The glow of the lights and the loud voices turned into distant noise. The weight of the loneliness I carried intensified again, and the feeling that I had lost the chance for something meaningful settled in my chest. What was that connection I had felt? What did it mean? And why was I so scared? My hands trembled slightly as I tried to find sense in it all. The young woman was just a stranger, wasn't she? I had saved many people in my life, but this felt different. It wasn't just an act of heroism, there was something deeper, something that linked me to her in a way I couldn't explain. The memories of my family, of shared laughter and moments of intimacy, intertwined with this new connection, creating a tangled web of feelings I didn't know how to handle. As I watched people dancing and enjoying themselves, I realized that despite the wealth and success I had accumulated, there was a profound emptiness in my life. What did I truly desire? Companionship, love, a genuine connection, but I had built walls around myself, fearing the pain that could come from opening up to another person. Yet, in that moment, the young woman made me question if there was still time to rebuild what I had lost. The gala was nearing its end, and I felt an irresistible urge to seek her out again. But at the same time, reason screamed at me to stay away. I couldn't allow myself to get involved again, not after everything. Pain was a constant companion, and I didn't want to risk losing once more. With a heavy heart, I cast one last look at the hall, turning away not only from the party but also from the possibility of something new and promising. As I walked toward the exit, the young woman still vibrated in my mind, like a soft echo I couldn't silence. I knew that her memory would linger with me, a persistent reminder that life goes on, even when you feel lost in pain. And perhaps, I wasn't as alone as I thought. In the days that followed the charity event, I couldn't shake Lily from my mind. Every moment that passed, every task I undertook, felt as if her image was etched in an invisible frame within my consciousness. I wondered how a simple interaction could ignite such an intense flame within me, a flame I believed had been extinguished forever. The loneliness that had accompanied me for years seemed, in some way, less oppressive when I thought about it. Every thought of Lily turned into a small light, a glimpse of a future I wasn't sure I deserved. I decided to seek her out. The idea of reuniting with her filled me with an anxiety I couldn't explain. I didn't know what I would say or how I would behave. The impulse to see her was so strong that when I finally managed to, I was overwhelmed by a mix of nervousness and anticipation. I discovered that she was involved in a social project helping underprivileged children in the community. I was drawn to the idea of seeing her in an environment where she felt fulfilled, where her light seemed to shine even brighter. When I arrived at the community center, I was greeted by the sounds of laughter and children's voices, a cacophony of joy that contrasted sharply with the emptiness I felt inside. The walls were decorated with colorful drawings, and the energy was palpable. I looked around, trying to find Lily among the children, who were so full of life. And then, I saw her. She was crouched down, surrounded by a group of little artists, her hands smeared with paint and her face lit up by a genuine smile. The scene was so pure that, for a moment, I forgot my pain. She was so immersed with those children, so dedicated, that she hadn't noticed my presence. I watched as she encouraged a girl to draw, her words soft and full of love. That image touched me in a way I didn't expect. I wondered how someone who had faced so many hardships could still maintain that light. The contrast between her life and mine was striking. I, a millionaire surrounded by wealth and success, was living in emotional emptiness, while she, with so little, radiated happiness and purpose. That moment made me reflect on my own life. How had I let time pass without truly living? Money and status meant nothing if I couldn't connect with the world around me. Lily's altruism made me realize that I had isolated myself in a bubble of pain and mourning, and that I urgently needed to find a way out. When she finally saw me, her smile widened, and I felt a wave of warmth flood my chest. She approached me, and the connection we began to create at that charity gala seemed to gain new dimensions. Her smile had the power to illuminate even the darkest corners of my soul. The conversation flowed naturally, and I felt that with each word, the barriers I had built over the years were beginning to crumble. However, there was something deeper that I couldn't quite understand. As she spoke about the project, about how each child had a story and a dream, I realized she mentioned something that connected her to her family. The way her eyes sparkled as she talked about her childhood dreams made me wonder if, in some way, my life was intertwined with hers. But the weight of my own story held me back from asking directly. The pain I carried was like a constant shadow, and I wasn't ready to confront it just yet. What intrigued me even more was how her gaze would become distant when she spoke of her childhood. There was a subtle sadness in her voice, a nostalgia that seemed to hide secrets. I wanted to know more, but the thought of opening old wounds in myself paralyzed me. So, I kept listening, trying to absorb every word, every emotion she shared, while a part of me struggled not to get lost in the fragility of the moment. The day turned into night, and I knew I had to leave. But before I left, I asked Lily if I could come back. I needed to see her again, to understand more about her and, in some way, about myself. She smiled and agreed, and a new feeling began to form between us, a promise that we were not alone in our struggles. In the following days, every minute away from her felt like an eternity. I found myself thinking about the children and how Lily dedicated herself to them. The sight of her working with so much love made me want to get involved, desperately wanting to be a part of that life that seemed so vibrant and full of purpose. From then on, my routine became a quest for moments that could lead me back to her. I began to feel as though I was awakening from a long sleep, and the idea that I might, in some way, find a new purpose drew me in. When I finally returned to the community center, the atmosphere was as vibrant as it had been the first time. This time, I was more prepared, more determined to open up and connect not only with Lily but also with those children who brought back the joy I thought I had lost forever. The smell of paint and colorful paper filled my nostrils, and I let myself be carried away by the energy of the place. Seeing Lily again made my heart race. She was there, as always, with that smile that seemed to bring out the best version of me. I talked with the children, and as I got involved, the feeling of loneliness began to dissipate. What had once been an empty space was now filled with laughter and little voices. The connection I was forming with those children was something I hadn't expected. Each glance, each laugh, was a reminder that life could be more than just pain and mourning. It was a new opportunity, and I was beginning to understand that love could heal even the deepest wounds. But even amid all that joy, the thought of my past still weighed heavily on me. When I looked at Lily, I saw that she, too, carried a burden, something that connected her to my story in a way I still didn't understand. Sometimes, when I watched her, there was a shadow of recognition in her eyes, as if she knew more than she was willing to share. These little hints only heightened my curiosity and my desire to know her even more deeply. Time passed, and I knew that the connection between us was strengthening. There was something deeper that bound us together, an invisible thread weaving our stories in ways I could barely articulate. And as I dedicated myself to understanding life through Lily's eyes, the truth about my past and hers began to intertwine, as if we were dancing to a rhythm that only we could hear. The gentle breeze of the afternoon caressed my face as I walked through the city, feeling each step as a connection to the world around me. The opulence of towering buildings and shining storefronts contrasted with the loneliness that had always followed me. It was as if, behind every smile I saw, there was an untold story, a silenced pain. However, the memory of Lily became increasingly present in my thoughts, invading my mental space with an insistence I couldn't ignore. In recent days, our meetings had become a ritual. It was as if, through her, I could catch glimpses of a life that had been abruptly and violently interrupted. Lily, with her vibrant energy and contagious passion, seemed to bring a light I had long thought had gone out. I was fascinated by the way she spoke about her work with children, her voice full of hope and determination. The way her eyes sparkled as she described each small progress they made me feel there was something deeper at play, something intricately woven with my own story. One afternoon, while we walked together in a park, Lily began to share more about her childhood. Her face lit up as she spoke of the small joys she found even amid difficulties. She described the neighborhood where she grew up, a place marked by challenges but also by a strong sense of community. I remember how her words danced in the air, as if each sentence were a piece of a puzzle I was eager to assemble. She talked about financial struggles, nights when food was scarce, but also about the laughter shared with the friends around her. The way she recalled everything with a mix of nostalgia and gratitude was impressive. As she spoke, a knot formed in my throat. Each of her stories resonated like a distant echo of a life I had left behind. The connection beginning to form between us was intense, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something that inexplicably linked us. I tried to focus on the stories she shared, but my mind insisted on wandering to other places, to memories I struggled to keep buried. In one of our meetings, while we talked about our pasts, I mentioned, almost without thinking, the accident that changed my life forever. The words slipped from my lips like a whisper, laden with a weight I could not ignore. As I mentioned that fateful day, I felt as if a shadow had crossed between us. Lily's expression shifted, and for a moment, the air felt thick. The tension between us grew, as if we were both aware we were touching on something profound, something that could make us crumble. She said nothing, but I could see the struggle in her eyes, a silent battle that spoke louder than 1,000 words. The silence that followed was almost palpable, as if the world around us had disappeared, leaving only the two of us in a vacuum of emotions. I wanted to ask, to know what was happening in her mind, but something held me back. The fear of breaking the delicate barrier we were constructing paralyzed me. After that moment, we decided to go out to a social event, something that should have been light and fun. But as we danced and laughed, a part of me remained stuck in our previous conversation. There was a tension in the air, an expectation that seemed to build between us. As the night wore on and the music enveloped our bodies, I couldn't help the impulse growing within me. Drawn by the strength of that connection, I leaned in her direction, trying to capture the moment I so longed for. The warmth of her presence was nearly irresistible, and the idea of kissing her felt natural, as if it were the next step in a journey we were both traversing. But when I finally tried to get closer, she pulled away, her expression shifting from surprise to something I couldn't decipher. Feeling the rejection, a chill ran through my body. I wasn't ready for this new layer of complexity that had settled between us. What should have been a moment of connection transformed into an abyss of confusion. I wanted to respect her space, but frustration overwhelmed me, as if I were trapped between desire and the fear of losing what we had built. That night ended with a sense of uncertainty hanging over us. The laughter and music that had once united us now seemed distant, like echoes of a time when everything was simpler. When we said goodbye, the touch of her hand was brief but enough to leave a mark on my skin. The reality of what was happening between us was becoming clearer, yet more complicated. I wanted to understand, to know why she had pulled away, but I also realized there was a part of her that wasn't ready to open up. In the following days, my mind wouldn't let me find peace. The image of Lily, her smile, her passion, and the pain hidden behind her eyes became a constant in my life. With every moment of solitude, the memories of our time together returned, bringing with them a mix of hope and anguish. What I felt for her was intense, and the connection that was beginning to form seemed fragile, like a thread of silk on the verge of snapping. As I walked through the city, I felt her presence at every corner, as if the memories of our time together were tattooed into every cobblestone. It was as if I were in an emotional maze, unsure of which path to take. The walls I had built over the years were starting to crack, and the vulnerability that came with it was terrifying. I wanted to understand what was happening, but the fear of confronting the truth was overwhelming. One day, I decided I needed to see her again. The urge to know, to understand, to feel her presence was overwhelming. As soon as I spotted her familiar face, anxiety surged within me. She was surrounded by children, laughing and playing, and the scene was so pure that my heart warmed. But at the same time, the memory of our last encounter loomed over us like a dark cloud. As I watched from a distance, part of me longed to run to her and ask what had happened, but another part hesitated, fearful of reopening old wounds. What I didn't know was that this hesitation could cost me more than I was willing to lose. The connection that had begun to form seemed to be on the edge of a precipice, and I wasn't sure I had enough courage to take the next step. With my heart racing, I realized that regardless of what happened, I couldn't just stand by and watch. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The weight of the revelation I had just received crushed me like a massive wave. I, Ethan Blake, a man who had built a life around pain and grief, now found myself faced with a new truth, a truth that transformed everything I thought I knew about my own life. Lily, the young woman who had captivated me with her vibrant spirit and passion for helping others, was the younger sister of one of the victims of the accident that had destroyed me inside. The connection we shared now felt like a cruel irony of fate. As I walked through the streets of the city, the familiarity of my surroundings brought no comfort. The bright lights and shiny storefronts of luxury shops seemed a dark contrast to the emotional turmoil I was feeling. The echoes of laughter and conversations around me were just distant noise, a reminder of how life continued for everyone except me. The summer heat mixed with the cold running through my veins. It was the kind of day where the beauty of the outside world became an insult to the pain I carried within. I tried to focus on my breathing, but the image of Lily, with her deep and expressive eyes, wouldn't let me be. I had grown close to her, built a bond that seemed promising, and now all of that was at risk. How could I look at her without being consumed by anger and pain? How could I face the sister of someone who had taken everything from me? I wanted to scream, to cry, but all I could manage was a deafening silence echoing in my mind. Finally, I reached my home, a space that once felt like a refuge but now felt like a prison. Every object inside seemed to carry the memory of a past I was trying to bury, but that was now very much alive, pulsing. I collapsed onto the sofa, the weight of the world on my shoulders. The image of the night of the accident came flooding back to my mind, like a movie that wouldn't stop playing. I remembered the sound of the ambulance siren, the faces of the paramedics, the feeling of helplessness as I watched my family being taken away, not knowing it would be the last time I saw them. I closed my eyes, trying to push these thoughts away, but the connection between past events and the reality I faced now was undeniable. Lily wasn't just a woman who had crossed my path, she was a piece of my past, a reflection of the pain I carried. The idea that she had no idea who I was until recently offered me no comfort. In fact, it only heightened my confusion. How was it possible that two lives so intertwined had remained separate for so long? The environment around me seemed to fade as I sank into memories. I recalled the last time I saw my family, the joy we shared together. It was a peaceful night, filled with laughter and promises of a bright future. Now, all of that felt like a cruel joke. The emptiness that had formed in my chest was unbearable. What was I supposed to do now? How could I look at Lily and not see just the sister of someone I lost, but also the possibility of a new beginning? I abruptly got up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city, which by now seemed so distant from me. The twinkling lights looked like lost stars in a dark sky. Life went on outside, but I felt trapped in a limbo, unable to move forward. What I feared most now was the idea that Lily might somehow understand me. How could I explain to her the pain I carried? How could I be fair to her when all I felt was the betrayal of fate? I decided I needed some time for myself. The confusion within me was too much to handle right now. I needed to forget, or at least try, the connection I had made with her. Work had always been my refuge, my way of distracting myself from the pain. I returned to the office, diving into reports and meetings, but with every passing minute, Lily's image insisted on returning. It was as if she was everywhere, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. That night, I dreamed of the night of the accident. It was a vivid memory, as if I were there again, trapped in the same nightmare. The sounds of screams, the smell of smoke, and the feeling of despair were all present. I woke up with a start, my heart racing and my body covered in sweat. What had I done to deserve this? The question echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that the past would never truly stay behind me. In the following days, I kept my distance from Lily. I wasn't sure if I saw her as a new beginning or a painful reminder of what I had lost. With each encounter I avoided, with each message I left unanswered, the guilt piled up in my chest. Yet, at the same time, there was a voice inside me pleading for protection. I wasn't ready to open my heart again, there was no room for more pain. However, life had a way of pushing things forward. One day, while I was in a business meeting, I received a notification on my phone. It was a message from Lily. The content was simple, but the words felt like they carried immense weight. She wanted to see me. My heart raced, and a wave of emotions hit me. What should I do? I couldn't just ignore her, but I also didn't want to face the storm of feelings that this meeting might bring. After long minutes of indecision, I decided I needed to confront this situation head-on. If there was one thing I had learned in recent years, it was that avoiding pain only made it more unbearable. I needed to understand what was happening between us. I needed to face the truth that was so close yet still so far away. Life couldn't just be about escape, perhaps the only way to find peace was through confrontation. I prepared for the meeting with a mix of anxiety and determination. As I got ready, I replayed in my mind all the conversations we had, every smile, every moment of connection we shared. There was a light in Lily that drew me in, and that light now seemed overshadowed by the weight of the past. I was about to enter an emotional minefield, and with every step, I felt the ground trembling beneath my feet. Upon arriving at the agreed location, my heart pounded in my chest. The atmosphere was steeped in silence, as if it were waiting for something, a moment of revelation. When I finally saw her, a wave of emotions washed over me. Lily was there, with her shy smile and an expression that mirrored the confusion I felt. What would come next? I knew we needed to talk, but the real question was, would we be ready to hear what the other had to say? Lily's absence weighed heavily on my chest like an anchor, a burden that seemed to pull me down into an endless abyss. The space she occupied in my life had been filled with a deafening silence, and as the days dragged on, I found myself surrounded by the loneliness that had always been my constant companion. Work had become my refuge. I dove into projects, meetings, and numbers, trying to lose myself in a routine that left no room for doubts or reflections. But no matter how hard I tried, the thought of Lily arose like a persistent echo, reminding me that something, or someone, was missing. She had become an intrinsic part of my life, even in her absence. The image of her smile, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about the children at the social project, all of it remained etched in my mind. Yet, each memory was accompanied by a sharp pain, a reminder of the connection we had, now marred by the devastating revelation that, in a way, we were enemies of life. The accident that took my family also claimed the lives of her loved ones, and, whether we liked it or not, Lily had become a constant reminder of that tragedy. On that cloudy morning, as I prepared to leave, I decided I needed a space to sort out my thoughts. I got in the car and drove to the site of the accident, a place I had avoided for years. The road felt longer than I remembered, and each curve brought back memories I tried to bury. The sun was shy, hidden behind gray clouds that seemed to reflect my mood. The surroundings, a mix of nature and concrete, seemed to watch me, as if they knew the pain I carried. When I arrived at the site, I felt a knot in my throat. The asphalt still bore marks from the impact, and the trees around seemed taller, as if they wanted to protect that sacred space from any intruders. I stepped out of the car, breathing deeply, and walked to the spot where everything had happened. The breeze was cold, and the silence was heavy. I closed my eyes and let the memories flow. The laughter, the conversations, the warmth of the hands that once held mine, all of it mixed into a dance of nostalgia and pain. I sat by the roadside, gazing at the horizon. Life went on, indifferent to the tragedy that had unfolded there. What was I hoping to find in that place? Comfort? Forgiveness? There was no clear answer to that. I just wanted to feel, and somehow face the ghosts that haunted me. Guilt had always been present, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. I asked myself if I could finally release this burden. But instead of answers, I was engulfed by a wave of emotions that seemed intent on swallowing me whole. Minutes turned into hours, and I remained there, immersed in thoughts. The past unfolded before me, and I found myself reliving every moment of the accident, every scream, every tear. The weight on my back grew heavier, as if the very sight was pressing me to find meaning in all that had happened. But what did I really want? To find a culprit, or perhaps, to apologize for having survived? The mind of a grieving man is a dark place, where guilt and pain intertwine in a macabre dance. I didn't know how to leave, how to break the chains that bound me to the past. I looked to the sky, hoping that somehow the clouds would part and bring clarity. But nothing changed. The world continued to turn, while I remained stagnant, trapped in a cycle of pain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I decided it was time to go. I got up, my muscles aching and my heart heavy. With each step I took, I felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind, but I also realized I needed to move forward. The way back home felt lighter, but not because the pain had disappeared. I had simply made the decision not to let it define me. Upon arriving home, the silence was deafening. Loneliness enveloped me like a heavy blanket, and I found myself searching for something to distract me. Work still awaited me, but that wasn't what I wanted. I glanced at my phone, hesitating. Part of me wanted to call Lily, to hear her voice, to know how she was coping with everything. But the fear that our conversations would turn into more pain made me hesitate. What if she didn't want to talk to me? What if I only reopened wounds that were still healing? But what surprised me the most was when, amidst this whirlwind of thoughts, my phone vibrated. The notification flashed, and my heart raced at the sight of Lily's name on the screen. She wanted to talk. A mix of relief and anxiety washed over me. I hesitated, staring at the message for what felt like long seconds. It was the invitation I didn't know if I wanted or feared. The urge to ignore it and move on was strong, but something inside me craved resolution, understanding that would free us from this spiral of pain. I took a deep breath and finally decided to respond. It was time to face what lay ahead, to confront not only our feelings but also what fate had intertwined in our lives. Yet, in that moment, all I could do was watch his figure retreat, and the despair within me grew like a fire spreading. I followed him, hesitantly, as he headed toward the garden. The flowers that had once seemed so vibrant now appeared sad, reflecting the pain that settled between us. I wanted to scream, to let him know that I was not an intruder in Emily's memory but a guardian of her legacy. When I reached him, Thomas was standing still, looking up at the starry sky, as if searching for answers among the constellations. The night was cold, and the gentle wind brushed against my face, but I could hardly feel the temperature. What mattered was the growing distance between us, the ache that had settled in our hearts. I knew I needed to reach him, but the words seemed to fade before they could reach my lips. And so, amid the heavy silence of the night, a new reality was unfolding. The love I felt for Emily, the connection we shared, could either become a chasm between Thomas and me or a bridge that united us. I was willing to fight for it, but I needed Thomas to be willing to listen as well. The sunlight filtered through the window, creating dancing patterns on the polished wooden floor. The atmosphere was thick with palpable tension, a silence that seemed to scream for answers. Thomas, with his gaze fixed on the horizon, struggled against the emotions swirling inside him. Sarah's revelation still echoed in his mind, a whirlwind of conflicting feelings. How could a young woman who had just entered his life have such a deep connection with Emily? The pain of loss he carried on his shoulders felt heavier than ever. I stood there, eyes filled with tears, trying to find words that could dissipate the confusion hanging between us. Thomas was not just a man haunted by the memory of his wife, he was a human being who had lost hope for a future. And here I was, a stranger, yet at the same time, an important part of a past he was still trying to understand. I wanted him to see that I wasn't there to replace Emily, but to honor her legacy. Thomas turned to me, his intense gaze penetrating my soul. The weight of his sorrow was etched on his face, and I knew what I had to say was crucial. A wave of courage washed over me as I began to speak about the pact I made with Emily years ago. I recalled the promise we made, in a moment of innocence when life seemed simpler. Memories surged to the surface, as if I were reliving each moment. Emily had promised to be a guide in my life, assuring me that if anything happened, she would be there, even in spirit, to help me find my way. As I spoke, I felt each word carry the weight of a truth that needed to be shared. Emily always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. She encouraged me to pursue my dreams, to believe in the strength that lay within me. And now, by exposing this connection, I hoped Thomas could see that the friendship we had was not just a fleeting whim, but a deep bond that transcended life and death. Thomas listened intently, his eyes a mix of pain and understanding. With each sentence I uttered, I noticed small shifts in his expression, as if he were slowly beginning to grasp what I was trying to convey. What I was trying to communicate wasn't just about me or Emily, but about the continuity of love that had always existed between us. Through me, he could still feel Emily's presence. Through our dreams and aspirations, we could together transform pain into something beautiful. The warmth of memories flooded my being. I recalled the afternoons spent with Emily, laughing and dreaming about the future. I was a hopeful teenager, and she was the friend who always supported me. Life had separated us in unexpected ways, but the bond we created never faded. I remembered her smile, how she could light up any room with her presence. It was as if I were speaking to her again, as if her words still resonated within me. The sunlight began to change, reflecting not only the passage of time but also the transformation taking place between us. Thomas seemed to be processing everything, and I couldn't help but feel a small hope blossoming within me. He was beginning to see that the connection we had was a gift, a legacy left by Emily that could unite us in ways we had never imagined. Finally, Thomas broke the silence, but not with words. Instead, he slowly moved closer, and before I could fully comprehend what was happening, he enveloped me in a tight embrace. The warmth of his body against mine brought a wave of comfort and compassion I hadn't expected. In that moment, all the barriers he had erected began to crumble. He wasn't just embracing a stranger, he was embracing the memory of his wife, the friendship she had for me, and the new possibility of a future still waiting to be built. Tears streamed down my face as I held him tightly, feeling that somehow, we were sharing both pain and hope. The connection between us had intensified, and I knew that together, we could navigate this sea of emotions. Emily always wanted us to find a way, and now, here we were, at a turning point, ready to honor her legacy. As we remained in that embrace that felt like it lasted an eternity, I sensed that the pain that had once separated us was transforming into mutual understanding. Thomas's grief wouldn't magically disappear, but I was certain that by remembering Emily, we were creating a new narrative, a story that included love, memory, and the promise of a better future. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over us. That moment, so simple yet so profound, symbolized the transition we were undergoing. The past was still an important part of who we were, but now the future had room for hope and renewal. Thomas and I were two hearts, ready to find new meaning in our lives despite the pain. Finally, we pulled away from each other, and I could see a new determination in his eyes. He was beginning to accept that although Emily was no longer physically present, her love and promises could still live through us. From that moment on, the pain that once separated us could become a bond, a path to celebrate the life Emily had lived and the love she still inspired. Through tears and laughter, through grief and hope, we knew that the journey was just beginning. Emily's legacy was not a burden but a light illuminating our paths. And together, we promised to honor that light, transforming pain into love and longing into a new beginning.